there's a great line by a philosopher I spoke to, his name is Ralph Ekamporo, and he said, and this is totally what I believe, he said, it doesn't follow to say that just because we can't know each other fully, we can't know each other at all. So here's the very sophisticated scientific model that I've developed after years of thinking about it and working with it. And I'm going to warn you, it's going to be a little bit difficult to internalize because it's very complex. What it is we got here, the red is the one, and the blue is the distinct, the many. I call it the one and the many. So the idea is that, yes, obviously, there are private aspects of another organism's experience that, due to the constraints of our biology, our instincts, our histories, we can't fully know. But we have to respect that. Indeed, that should be celebrated. This is something that, even then, you don't really hear anyone talking about that I find really awesome. This is true wildness. You can think of it as a kind of bestiary of mind, that all these strange internal sense ratios and hues, they're out there. The world is seething with them. So Darwin's endless forms most beautiful, which is his sort of famous line about the incredible diversity of biological forms, is as true of the internal world as it is of the external world. So that's something that I'm really sort of rapturously interested in. I mean, because it's a showcase for nature's creativity on a level and a dimension that we never think about. And yet, for all the exotic otherness of the animal mind, it's equally true that there are elements that we can know and we can understand. Since we all descended from a common ancestor, you can make an argument, and other people have as well, that there's always a measure of shared experience, of oneness conserved in body and mind. It may simply be that the volume of this shared pith shifts in proportion to the species in question. So, should I give you an example? These were just sort of picked at random. The common core we share with the bacteria, for example, is obviously way narrower than that we may share with a whale, which is in turn perhaps narrower than that we share with our close cousin, the chimp. In a sense, the human-to-animal mind question may simply be an exaggerated version of the human-to-human mind question. We can never entirely know what's in another person's head, all the more so if they're raised in a different culture. But there are huge points of overlap that can, and this is kind of my main point and the reason I present the model at all, that area of overlap can be expanded. So I call this the transition zone, this little purple wedge here on both sides. So that ratio, the one to many, of the shared to the private, the key point is it's not static. There's a transition zone, a kind of permeable area between the two that can be expanded using all of human capacity. So using, among that, scientific knowledge and close observation and reason, but also other areas that don't get as much play in the scientific world. So empathy, intuition, imagination, even ideas around embodiment. And so I'll touch on each of these as we go through. And the idea is that, yeah, actually we can kind of peer into this bestiary of mind. And as we do that, we can begin to locate some forgotten aspects of ourselves as well. And this is actually what I think is coming down the next historic pipeline. I mean, this is the next frontier is this recognition that there's this seething interior world all around us that not only has its own internal integrity, which we can begin to know, and this is where I get really speculative, and I won't go too far into it, although I can talk a bit about this at the end. I believe that ecology, that internal ecology, is interactive in the same way our external ecology is. So just as we interact with biology and biological processes and behavioral processes and chemicals and weather and geology and all these things that make up an external ecology, there's an internal ecology of mind that is also operating. And so you think of yourself as being separate and independent, and you're kind of in this self-contained solipsistic container. But actually, you're distributed out in the world in all kinds of really radical ways. And that's where a lot of stuff in consciousness studies is beginning to point, and it's a freaking insane, wild thought. I mean, to give you a sense of how far it goes, every single tribal tradition around the world basically believes that you're in constant interaction, in a sense, kind of subconscious conversation with all of nature. And you can begin to tap into those actual messages. So this is something I'm really into, and it's kind of in the far frontier of my research, but I'll start a little more. I'll just like pretend I just didn't smoke that weed, and we'll go a little back a little bit. So how far can we go? How deep can we splunk into the mind of nature? Let's kick it off. We're going into the whale, into the gerbil. Had way less grandeur, so I called it into the whale. We're going into the gerbil. So we're going to start with a little bit of science. That was the heady philosophy that kicked it off. And it'll progress modestly, reason, science, observation, then it's going to get more interesting and psychedelic as we get into audio world and imagination and embodied stuff. So, okay, so this is a quote. I love this quote. This is a writer, Joanna McIntyre. She wrote a really cool book that was way ahead of its time back in the 70s called Mind in the Waters. The book got, it was right when the Save the Whales movement was happening, and it was just full of all this awesome speculation about what whales are like, and humpback movies just came out. Everyone was like, you know, listening to humpback music and burning joss sticks, and it was a wicked 70s moment. And then it became like you weren't allowed to talk about whale brain at all, whale mind, animal mind, because John Lilly, this guy, went way too far and started giving his dolphins psychedelics, and then his assistant was giving them hand jobs, and it got dirty. It got dirty. Humans get dirty. So anyway, that was a slight derailment on my train of thought, but this quote, Joanna McIntyre, the way to enter the whale is to enter the water. So this is a very straightforward evolutionary idea that for some reason most scientists haven't really begun to look at, but basically the mind, just like the body, is shaped in fundamental ways by the cradling environment. And I don't just mean in a kind of cognitive processes way, but in other more fundamental ways. So the question is, if you're going to think about that, the question that comes to mind right away is, well, what kind of place is the ocean? What kind of place is the ocean? Well, we're going to check out the ocean right now. What would it be like? The question I want to ask is, what would it be like to spend millions of years involving in a medium just like that? How would it shape your experience? The constant pressure against your skin, the sense of being embedded and supported in a kind of fluid medium. I think it's very interesting. So maybe the way to think about it is by contrasting it with land. What kind of place is land? Well, on land, for one, we're bound by gravity, so we're stuck to the ground in a quite literal way. Land is filled with these little funky places to hide, these little niches to sort of defend, to put your back up against. It takes a lot of energy to move around on land. Plus, there's a lot of competition for food, so as a result, a kind of classic land animal strategy is to bunker down into territoriality. So chimps, dogs, humans, very territorial. You could say they have territorial minds. But in the open ocean, and no, here I don't mean like specialized reef systems or lakes, you know. I mean the open ocean, what is there to defend? You basically, you can move in any direction. There's no barriers, except for one barrier at the top, and even then you can just jump ecstatically into it in the form of a breach. You can move around really easily at almost no cost. There's absolutely nowhere to hide. There's no nest. You have no niche. You know, you don't. That's why it's hard to study whales, because they don't leave any. Where's their nest? Where they don't leave anything except for when they go down, they just like shit. And so you can look at their squid beaks, which is what I'll tell you about later. It's gonna get hot. And if for a whale, in terms of food, the food question, basically, either there's a ton of food, you're in a massive krill patch or whatever it is, or there's no food. So there's no competition for food. When you either got it, everyone's got it, or no one has it. So there's no sense of competition there. So all of this, I'm saying, kind of encourages a very powerful lack of territoriality. So I want to imagine, you guys to imagine for a moment that this were your world. So you're suspended in the open ocean. You can move in any direction, up, down, forward. You're embedded, supported in this thick medium. You can't fall over. You can't fall out of a tree. There are no missteps. And you have almost no predators. You have a few, but hardly any. What a feeling of safety and freedom and belonging that would cultivate. The whole ocean is your home, and it is for most of these great whales. So I'm sure this is one reason why whales have such a huge romantic appeal to us. And if you think about that, well then what do we notice about the whales? I mean, what do we notice? What have you noticed about whales? Unease? Have you noticed, like, what do you say? What adjectives come up when you look at a whale and you think about a whale and how a whale moves? Grace, ease, languor. There's a sort of slowness, a deliberateness, and I think that probably has a lot to do with the kind of environment. The ocean supports you in a different way. And as a result, in terms of their societies, they tend to be a lot less aggressive. Cetaceans, there's exceptions, but especially which I'll get into, and more dependent on one another. So this is what you see in the cetaceans, this incredible social dependency, and there's this incredible social cohesiveness, and compared to primates, very little intergroup strife. The exceptions are, of course, the gangbangers known as the dolphins. The dolphins can be really vicious and have all kinds of battles and stuff, but for the most part, when you look at cetacean society, there's a much more harmonious vibe.